Hello everyone, welcome to the install video for the ISC coilovers on the Fiesta ST. Tools you're going to need for this are going to be a jack stands, breaker bar, an impact wrench, torque wrench, ratchet, crescent wrenches, a 5mm Allen key, a 10mm wrench or socket, 12mm wrench or socket, a 13mm wrench, preferably a ratchet wrench, and a 17mm ratchet wrench. Be sure to brake torque on all your wheels. Then lift the car up and set it on jack stands. Now remove your tires and set them to the side. Next, you're going to want to open your hood and prop it up. Now go ahead and remove the 10mm nuts that hold the brake fluid reservoir in place and then set it to the side. Moving down to the suspension, remove the end link nut using a 17mm ratchet wrench and also a 5mm Allen key. Now remove the brake line bracket bolt by using a 10mm wrench or a socket. With the brake line bracket out of the way, brake torque on the upper and lower strut bolts using a 15mm socket, a breaker bar, and also a crescent wrench. Then go ahead and fully remove the upper and lower nuts. Before moving on, it'll be best to support the lower control arm using the jack. With the lower control arm supported by the jack, remove the cables and the bolts from the coilover. Then fully remove the end link from the coilover and set it to the side. Now separate the coilover from the spindle. Next, loosen all three of the upper mounting nuts and then remove one or two of them to maintain the coilover in place. With the remaining nuts loosened, grasp the coilover from underneath, remove the remaining nut or nuts, and take the coilover away from the car.
What I wanted to go over really quick was how to set these up. So I already did this, but basically, if I can get this off, all right. So basically what you want to do is preload the spring. Okay, so how you're going to do that is basically hand tighten, loosen this little locking nut right here, and then what you're going to want to do is tighten this until the spring basically doesn't move from the perch, like you're not able to pull it in and out, and also to where this stops and you can't hand tighten it anymore. After that, you're going to want to bring the locking nut all the way up. Don't really tighten it though. So like right there. And then you're going to take your large spanner and basically, so you're going to be tightening this part right here until between the locking nut and this one, this spanner wrench fits through it. That's like 5mm or whatever. And when I say fitting the spanner in between these two nuts right here, basically mean like that. So it's going to look something like that. And lock them up. Then you're good to go. Your springs are preloaded. Then go ahead, tighten these up, and you can install them. All right, one thing I forgot to mention was they actually supply, ISC actually supplies a anti-seize. So what you're going to want to do is after you're done preloading the spring, you're going to back this off and then put some anti-seize right here, and then spin it on and then tighten it up.
Now clean the mounting areas before installing the coilover. Once the areas are cleaned, install the coilover and hand tighten the upper nuts. With the coilover in place and the upper nuts hand tightened, fully tighten the upper nuts and then move on to the bottom. Now clean the spindle and the lower strut bolts and nuts. Using the jack to help out, attach the spindle to the coilover and insert the lower strut bolts and hand tighten the nuts onto them. With the bolts and nuts in place, remove the jack. Now adjust your end links to compensate for the ride height. If you don't have adjustable end links yet, I highly recommend getting them, especially with the coilover setup, because with the adjustment in the ride height, your end links might not be able to go back on, and it'll also affect your sway bars preload. But with adjustable end links, you can adjust them to whatever height the coilovers are at, and also adjust your preload as necessary, also neutralizing it if necessary. With the end link adjusted for ride height, reinstall the end link with the washers and tighten the nuts, leaving the locking nuts loose for preload adjustment later. Adjust the upper bolt to your preferred camber by either pushing in or pulling out, and then tighten the strut mount bolts and nuts. Now reattach the brake line bracket and tighten down the bolt. The bolt in the ISC kit is actually a 12 mil compared to the 10 mil that we have on the stock setup. Then reattach the cable to the attachment points. Now, after adjusting your ride height, clean the threads, loosen the locking ring, apply your anti-seize, and then fully tighten the lower and upper locking rings. Now torque the lower strut mount bolts to 65 foot-pounds, and then move on to the other side. Whenever you get finished with the other side, reattach the tires, lower the car from the stands, and then move on to the rears. Start off by raising the rear of the car and then set it on the stands. Then remove the tires. Now brake torque on the lower strut bolt. Now, utilizing the same process as the fronts, support the suspension with the jack, remove the lower strut bolt, and then lower the suspension using the jack. You want to be careful as the spring will probably fall out whenever you do this. If you have a sway bar installed, you'll need to lower both sides at the same time. Now fully lower the suspension and remove the spring and the perch. Next, you're going to want to clean the mounting points for the spring and the perch. Then go ahead and remove the 10mm upper strut bolts and then remove the strut. Now you're going to install the ISC spring perch as shown. If you choose not to remove the sway bar before this process, you're probably just going to have to maneuver the bolt a little bit. Now with the Allen key bolt facing towards the inside of the vehicle, or wherever your preferred location is for tightening it, go ahead and screw on the perch onto the bolt as shown. I never got the exact size of the bolt head, but I just used a small crescent wrench to fully tighten the bolt before moving on. With the perch locked down in place, go ahead and apply anti-seize to the spring perch threads, set your preferred ride height, if you know it, and then lock the ring in place. That finished, move on to cleaning the upper mounting area and bolts. Then remove the plug for the damping slot before moving on. Now install the strut and hand tighten the upper 10mm bolts. Now go ahead and fully tighten the upper strut mounting bolts using either a ratchet and a socket or just using an impact gun. For this next step, you can do this before or after installing the strut, but I decided to do it after just because I didn't really think about it. So you're going to clean the threads and then screw on the lower portion of the strut as shown. You'll be able to adjust the height as necessary whenever you get to installing the spring. Once the lower portion is screwed on, move on to installing the spring. For this step, you're going to want to raise the twist beam about halfway or where you can still insert the spring. And you're going to want to put the perch spacer in and then put the spring on. Then you're going to want to raise the twist beam until the spring won't fall out on its own. Now, while you're closely inspecting this process, you're going to want to raise the twist beam until the bottom of the spring is flush with the perch. Once this happens, you would have also preloaded the spring. With the spring properly seated and preloaded, adjust the strut height until the bolt is able to be fully inserted, and then you're going to want to fully tighten it. As a side note, as you can see here, there's no nut on the bolt, and there's a couple reasons for that. Well, it's kind of the same reason, but that bolt is not the same bolt that came with the sway bar. It's actually one of my old wheel studs, and the reason for this is because when I was installing the lower part of the strut, it kept hitting the original bolt. So I had to improvise and put this in place so it'll hold and make sure, hold it in place a little bit and not have it move just in case the other bolt comes loose. With the lower strut bolt tightened down, apply anti-seize to the threads and then fully tighten the locking ring on the strut. Now reattach the tires and lower the car from the stands. And then with the car on the ground, torque the wheels down, set your preload on the end links and then tighten the end link locking nuts. Then you're going to want to get the car aligned, and then after that, your job is fully complete. Thank you everybody for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to like it and leave your comments in the comment section below. If you want to subscribe, hit that subscribe button and the bell to be notified whenever I have new content. In the meantime, enjoy one of the videos in the top left or right. Have a good one.